This is the Chickenfoot podcast. My name,
Chickenfoot.
I've been known to be called Judah Buddha, and I am here with somebody who calls himself Arthur Spooner.
Arthur Spooner.
For reasons we will in the future divulge. And this is the Chickenfoot podcast, and we are talking about comedy, dissecting jokes, reviewing comics, looking at funny shows on TV, hopefully laughing as much as we can, because we love to laugh. So, Arthur Spooner, a.k.a. Joseph, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How's things going over in Westmont?
I've never been more mediocre.
Yeah, well, story of my life.
Well, so today is a good day to look at comedy. You're tasked with either making up a joke or coming up with one I haven't heard. So let's get right into what we call directing a joke. I messed up. I had a banner ready and I guess
okay. That's all right.
So what we call joke time. And so Joseph's, we alternate weeks, and one of us has to start off the podcast telling a joke. And you get 2x points for making it up. You get 1 point if you get the other guy to laugh. And you lose a point if the other guy's heard it before. And I got half a point last time for a chuckle, or sort of a courtesy laugh. And then afterwards we talk about what worked, what didn't. So the floor is yours, Mr. Spooner.
All right. So this conspiracy theorist dies, and he goes to heaven. And when he sees God, God says, "Look, I'll answer one question only." He says, "All right. Well, I want to know who killed JFK." And he said it was Lee Harvey Oswald. A lone shooter, one bullet, one rifle. Then the conspiracy theorist goes, "This goes higher than I thought."
That's good. You get the full points for that one.
Yeah. So that's why I had to make sure I had my historical facts, because sometimes I forget the guy's name. You know?
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
Hard to remember. All right. So let's talk about, what do you feel? Why'd you pick that joke, and what do you feel went well with that joke, or went wrong with it, if something went wrong?
Maybe my presentation wasn't as good, you know, because it's hard when you're not looking at somebody, you're looking at the screen.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm looking around. So maybe that. So when I look back and I saw you, you were kind of like, oh, what's this? So sometimes online, it's not it's harder to keep somebody's attention.
For sure. Yeah, it's interesting. Like the payoff was good. I feel like it could have been. You know what it was is that, like, something died in me when I heard. I wonder if you could use like a different conspiracy, because that conspiracy is like, but I guess it kind of works because that conspiracy has been just like when you hear about it, you hear like, oh man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the punchline is the fact that conspiracy theorists never believe anything contrary to what they already believe.
Yeah.
You give them, no matter what information you give them, they tend to be like, no. So that's the funny part.
Yeah.
Because everyone has talked to somebody who's stubborn.
Yeah.
And when you try to set something straight, they're like, they're not going to believe you, no matter who tells you, you know. And so the idea that God, who knows everything and is completely honest all the time, is somehow trying to trick them.
Well, I think that's what that's what makes the joke work so well is that it builds the tension. Like I did feel tension, like, oh man, here we go. Like you got to pick one side, like how are you going to like, okay, he went with Lee Harvey Oswald and then is like, oh, this goes higher than I thought.
Yeah, because that's the other thing is there is no higher.
Yeah.
Right. So not only does he have all knowledge and he's supposed to all honesty, all truth, but then there is nobody higher. And then so that's part of the humor. You don't expect it to go that way, I think. Yeah. So I don't remember where I heard that one.
Yeah.
But it for some reason that joke comes up often. I don't know why.
It's funny. I've never heard you say that joke. So yeah,
I've told it a couple times at work, and I've told it to other people, mostly because that's what I feel like nowadays, without getting into too much cultural commentary, is that people are reinforcing their own ideas, and so when you're talking about something, somebody's like, no, as opposed to say, well, I don't know, maybe. So that's why I've used it a couple times recently, and just, I don't know. I just thought it was funny. Anyways, so
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dissect it a little bit.
Okay.
So
our quadrilateral. Let's look at it through the quadrilateral.
Yeah,
so
let's look at
culturally. So we have there's a surprise element. There's a cultural element, decreasing of emotion.
I think for the audience, there's
no threat.
Well, I think we talked about part of the quadrilateral has to be a release or relief.
Yeah.
And I think that is a big part. It's kind of what I was talking about. It's like, oh no, like conspiracy theorists already. It's like, what is this?
And that's the first time I heard that joke. I was the same thing. I was like, again with the nobody wants to hear this crap.
Yeah, how's this going to be funny?
Yeah, it's like this is Amway. This is the Amway of jokes. You're like, again, but that's part of the tension you're bringing to give that emotional release.
Yeah.
Then the other thing, the cultural one is that's just, America, we always have like these conspiracy theory kind of things on almost every level, and every group, every subgroup has their own theories on things. So that's like a cultural thing right there.
Yeah.
And then the low threat, I mean, we're just telling a joke, so you're not threat. Although that's the part of the emotional tension too is kind of like, because you feel like somebody's pushing an idea on you. That's part of the other annoying thing about conspiracy theories is that the other person has to always try to convince you, and and you're like, I don't want to deal with this, Yeah. And then the surprise. Surprise that what's bigger? Where does it go from there? It's a surprise, but it's not a surprise. That's part of the surprise is you expect to hear
it's familiar.
You hear the familiar phrase, but you're not expecting that phrase with this situation.
Right. So we have the surprise, unexpected ending, but yet it is familiar. It's surprising, but it is surprising, but not unfamiliar.
Yeah.
And
that's part of what the cultural too. So the culture of like conspiracy theories, they say certain things.
Yeah.
Frequently,
well, we had
and
culture, environment,
behaviors,
common language. I think the common language is everybody knows about. When you say Lee, even though we probably neither of us can remember his exact name, Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, off the top of our head, like that's something that, like, when you hear it, you know who you're talking about. Yeah.
You know where things are going, and the phrase he uses, "This goes higher than I thought." That seems like something that a conspiracy theorist would say.
This goes
So,
higher than I thought.
yeah, so not only you have to know culturally what conspiracy theorists say and do and their typical behavior and how they phrase things and their worldview. So that kind of gets in the culture, but also the surprise, because you're using that line in something that you didn't expect, because your assumption is that's the other cultural thing, is that God, he knows everything, he's all powerful, he's honest, he's truthful. So those two worldviews collide. You're thinking he's gonna get all the answers, and he doesn't believe it. You know what I mean? So that's part of the two different cultures there. Your presupposition about what you assume God is, and then the culture of conspiracy theoryism.
Yeah.
And the surprise between their interaction. The emotional release is the tension that's building up. I guess it's tension and release. So either you're building the tension, or the tension's already there and you're releasing it. So there's a emotional release, a tension release, which is once you bring it up, you're like,
yeah.
You don't want to hear about conspiracy theorists. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's good. I think delivery on that you could really bring it home if you did one of these, like God says, "Was leave Javi Oswald one bullet, one person," and you go, "Goes higher than I thought."
Yeah, the pause.
Something, yeah,
because it builds a little bit more.
Or you get like a scared face, like. So the conspiracy,
like a suspicious look, like this goes higher than I thought.
This goes, or maybe you look down, or like this goes higher than I thought.
All right, so I got the quadrilateral in my head.
Yeah.
Is surprise, emotional release or tension release.
I said break in emotion,
yeah,
sudden shift,
and cultural. There's like a cultural
culture, environment, common language,
and then the fourth one is the level of threat.
Yeah.
So that's almost like the tension.
We'll call it tension instead.
So you got
threat.
tension, and then the emotional release. So the threat, that is kind of a tension thing, because if you feel attacked, you're going to feel some sort of tension. So it's the culture, tension, release, and then surprise. I think that's what we got.
Yeah. I have irony, and now these aren't part of the quadrilateral, but something always to look for. Because not all jokes have this, but irony and
but irony, isn't that part of the surprise?
I guess so. Yeah.
Because in the end, you're seeing that this is closely matched, where when you're initially saying it, or when you're initially confronted with it, you don't realize that
you're right. Yeah.
There's some sort of mirroring of what's going on. There's a surprise element.
Okay, and then the other thing I had. Oh, shnikes. Okay, so I'm going to put irony there. Breaking emotion, self-deprecation.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't self-deprecation. I think that's a different kind of joke, right?
I would say self-deprecation is almost the
threat, right? Or tension.
It's like it's relieving. I'd say it's the emotional release, because when you're using self-deprecate humor, say like, yeah, nice, I got a big mustache, or whatever. I don't know. I'm making Mario jokes on myself, right? I know I'm going to make those jokes on myself. So it's not a surprise to me, but it's an emotional release to the person I'm talking to, because I feel like it sets somebody at ease when you can make fun of yourself.
Yeah.
They feel more comfortable with you.
Well, and that's why I would put it more in, let's see. So that's why I put it more in safety or tension, because
this is what I think we need to make a distinction, because the tension is building up the tension, or the tension is already a high. Then there's the release, and that's the safety where the emotion goes down. So one is the elevating of the negative emotion or the tension, and the other one is the releasing of it.
Well, that's why I put it with safety tension, because self-deprecation sets up, like, it already puts people, like, it disarms people. So it takes away tension immediately. It's not building tension at all.
Yeah, that's why I say it's the release.
Well, but you're not releasing anything.
You're releasing the tension. When I'm making a joke about myself, you're going to have less tension and feel more at ease. But if I make a joke about you when I first meet you, that might build the tension up.
Okay, but hear me out. Like, I think that the whole idea of surprise, unexpected irony, those are things that are shifts. A break in, well, that's break in emotion, I guess. I guess it could go in either. Okay.
Because in my mind, what I'm picturing is the elevated emotion, which is the tension. Either you're building it for the joke or it already exists, like elephant in the room kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then self-deprecating humor, alleviates their emotion. So when you meet somebody and you say, so it reminds me, one time I went speed dating.
Okay.
Or no, I went on a date and there was speed dating going on at the same bar that I invited the lady. And so when we met, there's always that awkward tension and stuff. And I said, well, I'm glad you showed me. We said our pleasantries. Hi, you look great and stuff. And then I said, well, good thing for you that if you don't feel things are going out, you can always swap me out for another model.
Well, see, I think that's like a break in emotion. That's the relief.
Yeah.
Well, you can't relieve, like, I don't know, to me, like, self-deprecation doesn't relieve. It just it just sets it up like as like it disarms. To me, there's a difference between disarm and relief. Like, to me, the relief is like oh, what's he talking about? Like, is that you?
That's my phone.
So, like, to me, there is something that causes people to laugh when there's a shift in emotion, like almost a violent shift in emotion. So you're saying, like, you're talking about the date and she's like, oh man, but then you're like, yeah, you can swap me out. It's like, oh. But if you start off by saying, like, hey, sorry, my breath smells like poo, but like that like disarms her right away. I don't know. It's just a subtle difference.
Well, maybe we should, because I think part of our quadrilateral is that these four things are categories. So everything has to fall under those categories. So when we're talking about relieving tension or relieving emotion, that's a sense of I'm safe. So even though it's a slight distinction, I think it still falls under the category of that person feels safe when you're doing self-deprecating humor.
Yeah, but I just don't agree that. I mean, we can have our own quadrilaterals too. Like, I just don't agree that safety is a prerequisite for laughter or something being funny. In fact, what we're talking about is the tension and lack of safety is what makes something funny. Well,
give me an example.
Like what you're talking about, like the lack of safety, talking about the date, and then the shift to, like, you can always swap me out.
No, that I'm reinforcing safety. That's part of the joke there, is that, if things, you're getting scared of what's going on, you don't like me, you could swap me out for a different model that you like better, so you feel more comfortable. That's part of the joke.
Right, but that doesn't give a sense of safety as much as it just, like, gives her opportunity to.
It puts her at ease. To me, that's
there's a relief. Yeah, relief.
Yeah.
But you can't have relief unless you have danger, right?
Right. So what I'm saying is that tension, I didn't build up the tension. The tension was there. I'm using an icebreaker to relieve the tension. And so part of the safety is if I made a joke and I turned it around, say I said it the other way. I said, if things don't work out, I'll have to switch you out for somebody else. She would then feel like, oh, what an ass. So I
don't know. I think that's just as funny.
Well, if she has confidence, I think so. But she could feel like I'm kind of attacking her, like she's not good enough for me or something like that. Yeah. And then she feels like her ego is threatened. Not physical, threatened doesn't always have to mean your physical life, but it also could mean your psyche, your emotions. Yeah. And so the fact that I turned it on myself and made it self-deprecating, then she doesn't have to worry about me switching her out. She's the one in control, could switch me out.
Yeah. No, I agree. So self-deprecation goes in the safety tension quadrant.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Gotcha. So this is what I have. Surprise, unexpected irony, break in emotion, safety, tension, self-deprecation, and culture, environment, common language.
All right.
Not necessarily in that order. In fact, it probably should be in the opposite order. Culture, environment, common language, you set up a connection. Safety, tension, that'd probably be at the end. Break in emotion, that's at the end. Surprise, unexpected irony, that's at the end. So we should probably just put culture, environment, common language at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So there we go. That's good. Okay. So what did we say we were going to talk about something this week? I can't remember.
Well, you said you were going to send me a Seinfeld episode, which we didn't do that.
Okay.
And then we were going to watch a Office episode.
What episode is that one? I was looking for that one.
It's on, I think, season 3 or season 2.
Okay.
I think it's 3. And where Jan is living at Michael's house.
Yeah. Okay. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Well, if you haven't seen it by now, then sorry.
All right. And so we still got to do that. All right. Here's something I thought about that we could do is talk about stand up this time. So we'll just bump that to next week. I was thinking about talking really quickly about stand-up. Kind of goes off of what we're talking about as far as the quadrilateral.
Mm-hmm.
And certain stand-up comedians that just naturally are funny, or does stand-up comedy come from, or does it come from a combination, or is it just natural, like preternatural, like knowing how the timing works, or is it somebody who spends a lot of time in advance carefully constructing the sentences? Because I watched a video about Louis C.K.
Mm-hmm.
and how he goes about writing his jokes, and how every word is intentional. And the funny part being, so there's an actual meta humor in the sense that he is saying these perfectly crafted things, but saying it in a way that feels natural and like it just came off the top of his dome. And I think it's important to kind of talk about that before we talk about Seinfeld, because he was a master at writing, but yet probably not one of the best at delivery. Like but yet his delivery is good enough, you know, and like that. I don't know. So let's talk a little bit about stand-up comedy. Do you think, is it your understanding that stand-up comics like spend the majority of their time, like most of their work is writing? Like,
yeah, writing and testing. You know, so
talk
like,
to me more about that. What do you mean?
so you're feeling out because I think it's like, it's almost like poetry. You ever have the right poetry where you're thinking of rhyme and meter,
Mm-hmm. I
and
was
you're
just gonna
thinking of
say, is it like
crafting?
rappers? Are they like rappers?
Yeah, where they're crafting the right word.
Mm-hmm.
Because certain words evoke certain emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you could use one word. So so the joke I told. So the punchline was, this goes higher than I thought.
Yeah.
If I said, this is bigger than what I anticipated. I mean, I don't know if that's funnier. Anticipated is a funnier word, but higher, because bigger, it could be like lateral. So it doesn't mean it's above God. It could be somewhere else. But higher means it is above God.
Yeah.
You know? So the word higher,
it's a very key word.
Yeah, it's a key word. So you can change it and it could still be humorous. Mm-hmm. But I think what they're trying to do is they're constantly trying to test out how it's worded, the right words.
Right. Last week, for example, when I said exclaimed, you know, that was the wrong word because it took you out of the joke. It took you, it became a...
That's a culturally reading way. Like when you're doing it, it had a feel of reading.
Mm-hmm.
Like the culture, like if you're hearing somebody read, that has like a rhyme and a type of words and the way they do it. Yeah. But when you're speaking,
nobody says, well, he exclaimed.
Yeah, he exclaimed. Then he replied. So I think, you know, obviously there's that culture there, and Louis C.K., his thing is always, he immediately goes to the tension because he's always controversial issues. Like he'll talk about abortion or something, right? And he'll say, you know, I think it's wrong, but then he'll right after that say, but I think they should get as many as they want. You know what I mean? So he'll kind of turn the surprise of what you're thinking of where he's going. So if he says that he believes that it's wrong, then you're thinking, okay, well then he doesn't want anybody to get any. But then he's saying, yeah, I think it's wrong, but they should get as many as they want. You know, so it's a kind of a surprise turn, but he likes to talk about things that are controversial, and that instantly puts somebody in tension. You know, because any controversial thing is going to put people in tension. I think when you hear certain comedians, their shtick is like their group, whether African American or LGBT or married or fat or whatever, you know. And so there's very few people who just kind of tell jokes that, like Seinfeld is an example where I don't see a narrative overarching group or culture other than this is human experience culture. Not like this is the culture in the African American community and you're constantly contrasting that with other communities. So somebody in another community can still laugh because there's that contrast between them, but it's still race is a tension builder issue.
Right. Obviously. Yeah. For sure. Well, I was watching this Nerdwriter video, and Nerdwriter's a pretty interesting YouTuber, but he was talking about comedy in general, and he was talking about how important the joke he used was. It was actually not a lot of tension. It was actually his commentary on society was a little bit more meta, as he was talking about playing. Have you heard the one where he's talking about playing Monopoly with his kids? And he says, like how he was talking about how hard it is I guess he was saying his 6-year-old daughter knows how to play really well, but she's not emotionally capable. She's not at the emotional level to be able to lose every single time. And what Nerdwriter focused on is the 6-year-old actually totally gets how the game works, but she's not emotionally developed enough to handle her inevitable loss in every single game of Monopoly.
Yeah.
And he was pointing out how Louis C.K. he could have just said she's not emotionally developed enough to handle losing every game of Monopoly, but the fact that he said inevitably lose every game of Monopoly, it to go to what you're saying, it adds that more tension. It adds more it adds more weight to the sentence.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh yeah, crap, she has to, she it's gotta be, it puts you in her shoes, because you're like, man, I know things that I just cannot win at, in life, and I know how she feels. She gotta, little kids gotta lose all the time.
Yeah, but then the fact that he kind of draws it out is like he's really making you feel the length and the depth of the loss, because he could just say, and she's just not emotionally equipped to handle her losing.
Yeah.
As opposed to her inevitable single loss or whatever you said.
Inevitable loss every single time.
Yeah, inevitable loss every single time.
And
so
even the cadence. Like you're saying, like the poetic aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
The way it flows, the way you listen, it sounds almost melodic. Like her inevitable loss every single time. Like that could be a song. It's interesting how much.
But at the same, that kind of melody is almost like culturally what we kind of, if someone says every single time, that's outside that joke. You could imagine somebody saying that, and that seems like a cultural thing that we would do, how we would say something to emphasize that, like if somebody's over exaggerating, complaining, and they're saying, and somebody could say, well, every time I get here, the doors are closed. And they say, it's closed every single time.
And you can picture the little 6-year-old saying,
yeah.
How come I lose every single time?
Yeah. Because part of the emotion is that you emotionally feel hurt, or like you're at, and so you blow it up bigger than what it is.
Right.
Obviously, she's not. Maybe she is losing every single time. I don't know, but the likelihood is it more often than not. It's not necessarily every time. It's more often than not. But we tend to like the exaggeration is the emphasis in the punch.
Well, that might be something we should add to the quadrilateral somewhere, is exaggeration. That's something I hadn't thought about, but exaggeration tends to be a big part of comedy.
Well, I think that's part of the tension building.
Exaggeration?
Yeah. Because
I'll put it in exaggeration. I'll put it
because
there.
If you look at what Louis C.K. says, that every single time, that's kind of building the tension that this is bigger than just a single loss. This is like he's played dozens of games and she's always losing.
Yeah. Although, like, I think part of the funny part in this thing is that 6-year-olds do lose all the time. It's sort of like there's sort of a tragedy of. I don't know. There is a tragic thing about when he goes on to talk about how, like, the different. So then he goes to sets it up and talks about. I mean, it's just beautiful how he writes this joke. He talks about how he says, because Monopoly loss is dark, it's heavy. He says it's not like Candyland. And then I forget how, I have to look it up, but he says something like, it's not like when you lose at Candyland. Oh, you got stuck in fudgy thingy, baby. Oh. Well, you're in gummy twirlios. You didn't get to win. He said, but instead I have to say, you lost all your money and I take all your properties and you can't play the game anymore because you owe me way more than you can pay me.
It's complete destruction.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And it's like it corresponds with real life. A nerd writer talks about how he when he picked Candyland, it's a perfect counterpoint because it's like Candyland, yay, fun colors, who cares, candy, I'm hearing candy. But in Monopoly, it's like it's much more like your accountant coming to you and saying, you just lost everything. You know, you have no more money or property.
Well, with Candyland, even if you lose, you could still say, man, I was just 10 squares away.
No, that's true too.
And with Monopoly, it's all or nothing. There is no second place.
Right. There's no destination.
Yeah. Really. You could, all the hard work that you put in and all the emotional investment you have doesn't pay off. You still have nothing. And there is no like almost or this or that. That's just the almost makes it even more painful because you're almost able to take all their stuff and be able to still survive. So it's an all or nothing as opposed to, well, you're pretty close. You know?
Yeah, it's true. And goes to the exaggeration. You want to, I think in jokes, it's important to exaggerate. Like you said, I think you're right. It has to do with the pain or tension that you're playing with, because you want to exaggerate. So because in the quadrilateral, it necessitates a shift. A tiny shift is not going to make you laugh. It might make you chuckle, but the bigger the shift, the bigger the laugh.
Yeah, because he's also exaggerating the safety. Oh, you're in Gumdrop Marshmallow Puffy Land.
Yeah,
you know, he's making it sound even more safe.
Yeah.
And as opposed to like, I own everything. Go to jail.
Yeah, go to jail.
You don't get to pass go. You don't go. You're going right to jail. You don't get any money. So it's the contrast between the exaggeration of the safety and the exaggeration of the threat.
Right. Well, so can we segue into how can we use that? So the reason, so what sort of brought this whole thing about me and you talking about comedy? I mean, we've been trying to do something like this for a while, but I think what really gave me the motivation to do it is watching David Spade's Last Call and just noticing how these comics can he'll put a picture up. Yeah. And obviously he's got some written jokes already ready to go and in his pocket. And maybe that's we need to talk about that, like maybe in the next show, but or maybe now. But the way they're able to riff and the way they're able to make jokes off of almost anything, obviously it has to be sort of interesting things to start with. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing: is I don't know if everything is brand new to them. They might be like initially saying these are what we're going to cover, and then they might have some time to write it down. Because if they just left it up to them, there might be long pauses or less funnier jokes. So they might give them a heads up so they have some idea. But it's the free exchange also that they might be coming up with jokes, hearing someone else's joke, and then coming up. But they might already, because like David Spade has pre-written jokes, so they might have one or two, or they just might get like general topics. It's sort of like Whose Line Is It Anyways?
Yeah.
Where they know general categories, like, okay, they're going to do like item. You got to make up a joke for this item. Or sing a song.
Well, that's interesting. I don't know if it would make sense if they do give them a list ahead of time saying like, hey, we're going to talk about Beyonce and Bieber and, and so like start coming up with some jokes here. And that would probably help, especially since some of them are not, some of them are not even, I wouldn't even say like that kind of comedian, a more sketch comedy guys, which like, I don't know.
And I think with the commonality all of them have, whether they're doing whether the person on there is an actor, a comedian, or a stand-up comedian, or a writer, is that they all have to write their joke.
They're all writers.
They're all writers. So if they write comedy or if they tell jokes, they still have to write. And so giving them time to kind of craft it will be helpful. That's not to say they're giving them like a month.
Right.
They might come in and say, hey, here's like a initial spreadsheet of like what we'll probably cover. It could be any of these things depending on time, whatever. And then because some of it is, I think it is freelance back and forth, where like when he's doing his initial monologue and they'll throw jokes in at him.
Yeah.
Or sometimes there might be a back and forth between people. And
I've seen it get uncomfortable to where like I know it's not scripted. And also there's been episodes that's like that wasn't funny. there wasn't. I mean that it sometimes it misses. Yeah, I definitely don't think it's scripted, but I think it is pre-planned generally. So they'll say we're going to talk about Beyonce and Jay-Z fight or whatever. Yeah. Or and also they might already have some sense, because if they're in the know, because some people like they've had Norm Macdonald on there. Yeah. And he's not a cultural guy. Like he's not on the forefront of what's going on Twitter and stuff. And so but David Spade is. He loves like The Bachelor and all that. Stuff. That's where I would imagine some people they would give like, they're going to talk about this. Well, what am I idea? The clip that drew me in is I saw some clip where he had I forget the two comedians, but he had two older comedians on, and they were kind of like arguing it, like, what is that or something. He's like, and David Spade's like, it's like having two grandpas on my show. Or and I love it. And I think he really is what makes the thing. David Spade's gift, other than sort of having his finger on the pulse of a lot of the superficial Hollywood, like stuff that anybody can find interesting, but it's not really like deep. It's good for comedy. The other thing is he is very good at having certain go-to moves. He has moves. He has certain moves that can be applied, and that he is just so good at pulling them out. Like, and that would be a cool thing for us to do, is sort of dissect. When we go over comics, I think David Spade should be one that we look at. Well, here's the thing about David Spade. I think culturally things have changed to where David Spade can work, because his Lights Out show, he has other comedians on there, but he had a comedy. He had a comedy show like 10, 15 years ago, and he was doing the same thing. He was making fun of like cultural stuff. Yeah. But people were more offended. More offended than nowadays? Yeah. But I think now with Twitter, people just expect you're going to get ribbed at a certain level, so people can let stuff wander off. But especially like famous people, because his thing was he would make fun of like famous people's thing, and the famous people would get their feathers ruffled. Yeah. Then he's like, so then we'd hear it from the network because, yada, yada, yada. And when we get back to him. So it didn't work. Right. And so I think Twitter has kind of brought down the expectation that everyone is above being made fun of. But at the same time, Twitter has given people thicker skin. It's on a certain level it has, but it also has brought out people who go on there and they know that their things are going to offend them and they want to fight. Right. So but I think it's a both and, because now people tweet, and it's I to me tweeting seems infantile. So when I hear someone tweeted, that even sounds silly just to say the word tweeted, right? Yeah. Well, but doesn't that that's kind of a generational thing too, though. Maybe, but I've never heard anyone say, I read this tweet and it was so inspiring.
to me, and it was the most inspirational tweet that I've ever read.
But inspirational doesn't equal mature. In fact, I would say that like inspirational stuff has been some of the like more superficial, like dumb stuff in the world that I've ever experienced.
Maybe some of it, but inspirational still has a deeper meaning. But on Twitter, if somebody throws a joke out there, I'd say, yeah, that's a valid way to do it. If you want your jokes out there and you want an audience, that's the best way to get your jokes out.
Really? Twitter?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, people are going to share it because I think humor is the thing people will share and enjoy more than political or religious dialogue or just even lecturing or.
It's funny. I don't see any jokes online. I mean, on Twitter. You follow like comedians and stuff?
No. Oh. I don't pay attention to any Twitter except for if it's a joke I might listen to.
How old are you? Like 70?
To me, it's worthless. It's stupid. To me, it's just a dumb medium.
I got grandpa over here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, getting back to what we're talking about as far as writing versus off the cuff. How can we? So first of all, I think you and I should write more. We should have prepared. So we need to transition from our jokes at the beginning. Like, I think it's good to start with jokes that, we've heard, or jokes that, sort of obscure jokes that you haven't, like trying to find ones that you've never heard before. Transitioning to that, we should start writing jokes, even if they're terrible. What I really liked about Norm Macdonald's show is, you remember the Norm Macdonald show where he'd have it? I forget what his buddy's name was. That guy he had on with him.
It's like
he would write jokes, or both of them would write jokes, and they would give them to the
they're really horrible jokes.
They were usually pretty horrible, but sometimes it'd be a really good one. But to me, the substance of that bit or that segment was the fact that they were writing all these jokes. Like, that's a lot of jokes to write. I can't even write one, although so what I'm going to share next week is I'm going to share a little stand up at the beginning.
Okay.
I'm working on it, and I'm going to need, it's not going to get any points.
Well, here I think if what we could do, I mean, you could share your stand up if you want. Maybe we should talk about, because the difference between humor and stand up, there's a difference, right? Because you can say something that's funny that's not stand up.
Yeah. Well,
but yeah. I mean, because how many times have you heard a joke and I wasn't on a stage with a microphone, right? So you can say something humorous. That doesn't mean it's a stand-up act.
Yeah.
And so an act, there has to be like a opening, a narrative, like a character almost, and a flow of how the story or the narrative is going. So you can weave these jokes together. I mean, because you could do a hard transition into a new thing, but that kind of breaks the tension and it feels more mechanical. But if you can just begin to feel like you're having a conversation, telling jokes, that's part of the magic of stand-up, is that it feels natural. The person has written all these jokes and they just flow together, and they're transitioning into different topics, but they're kind of piggybacking off the last one. And
so I think you're right. There's a big difference between stand-up and a joke, but I think stand-up is a good way to talk about jokes that aren't necessarily like prepackaged jokes, and they're not necessarily, because we do storytelling at the end, funny storytelling. It's not necessarily funny storytelling, and it's not necessarily a prepackaged joke. It's something in between. Okay. So maybe we could just call that stand-up.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm saying, is that you could do your stand-up, or we could just dissect the process of what a stand-up act has to do.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, we got to do that. But I think writing jokes and writing stuff that's funny, I think we really need to do that. It's so hard. It's so hard. I spent a whole week I really wanted to write something for last week, just couldn't do it. Yeah. But now I feel like I'm a little bit closer. Next week, I'm gonna give it a try.
Okay.
All right, we only have 10 minutes left. Are you ready to?
I don't have a story off the hand.
I do. Okay. I may have one or two. Well, I have a long one. Okay.
All right.
So, I don't know if you've heard this story before. You probably have. You probably have for sure. But in my trips to Montana, I fought a man, and for money. And to me, it's a funny joke because not a funny joke. It's a funny story, because when I was just going into town, I was living out in the woods of Montana. I needed money. We were hunting and drinking basically for like half a year, living in a beautiful, nice little cabin up in beautiful near Missoula, Montana. I went into Missoula to make some money, worked at Labor Ready for a little bit, made pittance. But my brother had fought in a cage match and made $150 on his travels. And I looked around for something, and lo and behold, I found a place. It was this like big building in the middle of Missoula where they had a ring and you could sign up and fight. And if you lost, you made $50. If you won, you made $150. And at the time, I was in the best physical condition I've ever been in, ever, because we were chopping wood all the time. You know, maybe the alcohol didn't really help my physical condition, but I was in tip-top condition. I was 23 at the time, and just specimen of manliness. But I'd never fought before. I mean, the biggest fight I'd ever been was when I was like, I don't know, 12, and fought the neighbor, and both of us went home crying. So I show up. This is the week before the fight. Okay, so I show up, and the actual signing up to me was funny because I walk in. It's like a Dick's Sporting Goods type place, and you go to the back, and there's like a sort of a older guy, Montana guy, big mustache, and looks like the kind of guy that could probably kick my butt, right? And I'm like, oh, I want to sign up for the fighting. He's like, yeah, sign up here. Okay, what's your name? Got my own stuff. He's like, okay, what do you want your ring name to be? And at the time, I was driving a van it was a catering van, and instead of saying complete catering service, it said Ompoli Cat Ring.
Service.
Yeah,
I remember it.
Service. Yeah.
I remember it.
And so I'm like, oh yeah. I want to be Ompoli Cat Ring. And he like looked at me and he's like, okay, your name's gonna be Boneyard. I was like, okay. Yeah, Boneyard. That's way better. That's way better than what I had.
I can see Cat Ring. And everybody like, what the hell? This guy's gonna
like, I want to be Cat Ring.
They're like, I'm not betting no Cat Ring.
He's like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
So, anyways, so then he's like, okay.
In, Fluffy Fingers.
So he's like, okay, look over there. That guy who just signed up, he's the guy you're gonna be fighting. He's sitting at the bar. I'm like, oh, sweet. All right. I'm starting to feel a little bit like this is for real. I go and sit by him. It's weird. It was like a Dick's with a bar in it. Like that's what Montana was. There's bars everywhere. So I go sit down and start talking to him, get to know him a little bit. He's an interesting guy, taller than me. I want to say that was, so I start to look at him and think, man, this guy, I'm starting to size him up. Think like, can I beat this guy? You know, like, and so then the old man yells over me, he says, hey, Boneyard. Hey, Boneyard.
Cat Ring.
Yeah. I don't hear you. My name's Cat Ring. No, but anyways, he's like, Boneyard. No, things change. You're gonna fight this guy, and it was like this shorter, like, I don't want to say fat, but like stockier guy, you know. And I was like, yes. I was was like, okay, nice knowing you. And that guy took off. I went back, okay, blah, blah, blah. But I'm thinking, man, this guy's, I'm going to kick this guy. So fast forward a week later, I get there. I just show up at the, preordained time. The time they gave me, I show them my, name and my license and get in. Go down to this dark, it's like this dark place behind the ring. I'm starting to feel super nervous at this point. I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And then it was like a couple of guys were in the back kind of ushering people in. There's 2 trainers in there. So a couple of black guys were like there and sort of helping. Sweetest guys you could, these aren't just tough. There's really great guys back behind there. And good for me, because I get back there and they're like, okay, where are your gloves? I'm like, you guys don't provide gloves? And they're like, well, you could use these. And then they're like, okay, you're gonna wrap your hands?
We got some mittens for the kid. We need kid mittens over here.
Well, then they're like, are you gonna wrap your hands? I'm like, wrap my hands? Huh? And they're like, no, you gotta. So they help me wrap my hands.
That should have been a sign you're way out of your league.
Oh man, they're starting to look at me like, have you ever? And they asked me, so have you ever fought before? You're starting to see panic on their faces, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't worry about it. I got a plan. Anyways, they're like, so you got to keep your hands up. Your hands are gonna get a lot tired. It's a lot harder to keep these gloves up than you think. The whole time you need to keep them in front of your face. And I'm like, yeah. My whole plan, I had this genius plan. My plan was get hit in the face, because I can take a punch, get hit in the face as much as possible, and he'll get tired, and then I'll pounce, and I didn't want to tell him that, because at this point, obviously I'm an idiot, right? And so I'm like, this plan's either going to be golden or totally fail. Well, it totally failed, but it was fun. I got out there, started doing my plan, and immediately realized getting hit in the face is not go figure, is not as easy as I thought it would be. So I'm out there. I'm like, oh crap, I need to start blocking some of this crap. And so in about 2 rounds, I was TKO'd. I fought to stay on the I didn't know that you could be TKO'd. So I thought, I was just like, they're not going to knock me out. I can keep going. But apparently my eyes were going like this or something, because the ref's like, you're out of here.
Yeah.
It's dangerous for you to be here.
And then the guy who gave you your name was like, now I understand an employee. I understand.
He's like, you're not boneyard anymore, sucker.
No wonder why he was like, I'm not boneyard. There's no way I can measure up to boneyard. Oh man.
So anyways, yeah, I got I mean, there's more to the story, but that's
like your first time you bought a motorcycle story.
Oh, I gotta tell that one at some point.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, so we got just a few minutes. I'll tell a quick story.
Okay, quick story.
When we were in Toccoa,
mm-hmm.
and it was a Christian school, if anybody doesn't know, Toccoa Falls, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And so a group of us were driving to the Mall of Georgia. And I'm not a huge music guy. I listen to a lot of old stuff. I'm really not up to date with the new stuff. And they had a conversation of what would be your theme song? If you had one song that could be your theme song, what would it be? And everyone came up with some great songs, and I couldn't think of any songs. Mine was blank, and I felt like I missed out on enjoying this conversation, So I determined, I said, you know what? If this conversation ever comes up again, I'm going to have a song. So I sat down and I, would hear songs. Every once in a while I would think, would this be good? Would this be good?
You made it your mission.
Yeah, I made it my mission. Well, fast forward 3-4 years, I'm in seminary.
Okay. And
we're about to do a study group. And we're sitting there and we're kind of waiting for everybody to get there to start. And when the people asked, said, what would be your life song? And I was like, yeah, this is me. I know this one. And then they call on me, and I said, "Staying Alive," the Bee Gees. And then everyone's like, okay. Then the next person goes, and they're like, "Beneath the Rugged Cross." And everyone started naming all these hymns and worship songs. And I'm like, what? No, I went first. There's no way to redeem. I didn't fill out the crowd. I didn't know. I'm like, "Staying Alive, the Bee Gees, baby." And they're like, "Beneath the Rugged Cross. Oh, Holy One of Georgia." Or I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, oh, man. I was like, "You son of a bitch." I just screwed myself. I've been waiting for years for this conversation, and I blew it.
Well, that, to me, that's like a really funny, like that would be a great punchline. Like, what's your favorite life song? "Staying Alive" by the Bee Gees. I don't know. That's great to me. That's a good one.
Oh, man. I felt so embarrassed. Because you know how it is when you're in Christian circles.
Yeah.
Some people are trying to be, it's almost like there's like a subtle thing where
one-upping each other.
Yeah, one-up and who's more spiritual and touch and stuff. And it's like, I didn't even try on this one. It's like I threw the dart and hit the guy over in the other bar. You know what I mean? I wasn't even close. It was like I was never even heard of this.
How did they react when they were like, "What?"
It was just silent. I think everybody had the same mindset. I didn't. Everybody, when they brought that up, everybody knew, or at least it seemed like everybody was on the same page, except for me. So when I said it, it was just kind of like, okay. And then the next person goes, and then I got what they're talking about, and I was like, oh. And now I got to hear 15 hymns. Like it's my turn, and we could blow past this and start studying. And try to redeem myself by knowing the answers on the class. I'm already behind.
Man. Well, that's a good song to play us out on. Ha 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 ha. Staying alive, staying alive. Ha 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 ha. Staying alive. All right, man.
All right.
Well, I hope you have a great rest of the day. And for all you out there, I hope you keep it light. I got nothing. How do we, what kind of outro should we, like, we should say something at the end that's funny.
Yeah, well, we haven't come up with anything yet. I don't know. We'll just keep it on.